Okay, we're going to continue with chapter 2 of the lecture on the heritage of the ultimate law of life and death by Daisaku Ikeda. We're going to go to page 20, which is where we left off last week. We didn't quite finish that chapter by not getting into key points. So we're going to read the key points first on page 20. The ultimate law of life and death. This is a declaration that the supreme teaching enabling people to fundamentally overcome the sufferings of birth and death is none other than Myoho Renge-kyo, the mystic law. As the basis for this claim, Nichiren makes two principal points in this writing. First, he shows the legitimacy of the heritage of the Lotus Sutra, which is seen in the Buddha's Shakyamuni and many treasures, entrusting Myoho Renge-kyo to Bodhisattva superior practices, the leader of the Bodhisattvas of the earth. Second, Nichiren considers why Myoho Renge-kyo is the supreme teaching for surmounting the sufferings of birth and death. All birth and death, all occurring phenomena, represent transitions or instances of emergence and extinction, which are part of the rhythm of the great law of the universe itself. We need to reappraise the meaning of birth and death in the context of human beings from this all-encompassing perspective of existence. The power of the heart. Of the bodhisattvas at the ceremony in the air, only bodhisattva superior practices, whose mission is to take the lead in manifesting the law, is endowed with this supreme power of wisdom. His name is Superior Practices precisely because of his incomparable excellence in practice. The countless bodhisattvas of the earth who follow him can acquire the same wisdom he possesses through the principle of substituting faith for wisdom. In this sense, the bodhisattvas of the earth also excel in the power of faith. When we reconsider the bodhisattvas of the earth from the standpoint of the power of wisdom and the power of faith from the standpoint of the power of the heart, their true nature becomes clearer. Spreading the mystic law. In addition to excelling in the power of the heart to manifest the mystic law, another characteristic of the bodhisattvas of the earth is their excelling in the power to practice, to spread the mystic law. At the core of this power of practice lies a vow for Kosen Rufu, which is the key to propagating the law in this Sahe world after the Buddha's passing. In the Supernatural Powers chapter of the Lotus Sutra, the bodhisattvas of the earth, led by superior practices, vow to propagate the law in an age when the Buddha is no longer present. This vow becomes the driving force behind the power of practice directed toward spreading the teaching in such a troubled, defiled age. In a world rife with evil, the darkness or ignorance shrouding people's lives is deep and pervasive, and those who seek to spread the mystic law are sure to encounter great obstacles and persecution. The power to turn back and overcome the polluted current of such an age lies in a solid vow to propagate the law. Okay, so that was a recap of the subject matter that we discussed last week. The dialogue and reflection component of that then would be two questions. Whenever we throw ourselves into our struggle as disciples of President Toda, the power of practice, the inherent power of bodhisattvas of the earth, and the power to battle evil would surge forth within us with incredible force, enabling us to break the chains of destiny for ourselves and help others do the same. We changed from people who sought help into people who helped others. How has helping others in their practice affected your life? It's asking you to think about that. All right? The second point, the Soka Gakkai is a gathering of bodhisattvas of the earth that was founded by Tnesaburo Makaguchi and Josei Toda, mentor and disciple, in accordance with the Buddha's decree. Because of the great struggles of the Soka Gakkai's first three presidents, bodhisattvas of the earth have now appeared all over the globe. And the question would be, what have you learned from the three founding presidents of the Soka Gakkai? Okay, so going on to chapter 3, starting on page 22. And before I go to that, let me go to page 12. If you go back to page 12, before I go into chapter 3, let me read what he had said to recap to you what's going to happen now. Okay. First, he shows the legitimacy of the heritage of the Lotus Sutra, which is seen in the Buddha's Shakyamuni and many treasures, entrusting Myoho Renge-kyo to Bodhisattva superior practices, the leader of the Bodhisattvas of the earth. In this installment, which was last week, I will discuss the significance of this point. Second, Nichiren considers why Myoho Renge-kyo is the supreme teaching for surmounting the sufferings of birth and death. In the course of that discussion, he indicates that the birth and death of all living beings and the arising and extinction of all phenomena constitute life and death as functions of Myoho Renge-kyo. In other words, all birth and death, all occurring phenomena represent transitions or instances of emergence and extinction, which are part of the rhythm of the great law of the universe. We need to reappraise the meaning of birth and death in the context of human beings from this all-encompassing perspective of existence. I will take this up for discussion in the next and subsequent installments, all right, which is what we're about to begin now. And unfortunately, we mentioned to everybody around the table, we won't be able to be here next week, so we're going to take a 1 week skip on this. So we're going to get through chapter 3. I don't think we'll get to chapter 4. Hopefully we go all the way through 3. But next week there won't be a video. So I really suggest actually next week that you not skip 2 weeks, that you go back and you kind of review these past 3 videos, okay, inclusive of tonight, so that when we go into the next one in 2 weeks, because this chapter and the next chapter really lay out the foundation of the Soka philosophy. When he says we need to reappraise the meaning of birth and death in the context of human beings from this all-encompassing perspective of existence. What is he saying? He's talking about we need to discuss this from a new approach to understanding things in a current manner that relates to today. All right? We need to reappraise. So he's saying we need to rethink the old mechanisms of analysis and incorporate things that we now know from the advancements of science and also the advancement of Kosen Rufer for 50 years. Okay, there have been a lot of things that have been gained by virtue of that. So he says, I will take this up for discussion in the next and subsequent installments, starting with that installment. The next one is what I'm reading now. Chapter 3, page 22. In the previous installment, I discussed Nichiren Daishonin's statement that Myoho Renge-kyo, the heritage passed on from the Buddha Shakyamuni and many treasures, to Bodhisattva's superior practices during the ceremony in the air and the Lotus Sutra, is the ultimate law of life and death. In the passage we will be studying this time, Nichiren goes on to explain the profound relationship between life and death and Myoho Renge-kyo. This section can be read as an expression of the inner realization of Nichiren Daishonin of Bodhisattva's superior practices, whose life, as I mentioned last time, has in truth throughout the infinite past never been separated from Myoho Renge-kyo. This following section clarifies the theoretical grounds for the designation of Myoho Renge-kyo as the ultimate law of life and death. Okay, so everybody's clear with where we're going with this now, right? All right, so continuing on page 22. The following section, I'll say the last sentence again. The following section clarifies the theoretical grounds for the designation of Myoho Renge-kyo as the ultimate law of life and death. Because again, we're qualifying that Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is that, right? So that's the point here. Not everybody understands that to be the case. And we have to be qualified to be able to convince them that that is the correct understanding. That's why we study this. So going on, page 22. Life and death are part of the inherent rhythm of the mystic law. So what's that saying? Again, recapping what I've already said 50 times so far. That life and death are the two phases of reality. Yes. You're either in a manifest state or you're not in you're a non-substantial state, right? Okay, but you still exist either way. All right? And the life that is you, the karmic influence that is you, exists in either one of those states, either substantial or non-substantial. Do you understand? Yes. Okay, right. So, Myo represents death and Ho life. Living beings that pass through the two phases of life and death are the entities of the 10 worlds, or the entities of Myoho Renge-kyo, literally the entity of the lotus of the entity. Tentai says that one should understand that living beings and their environments and the causes and effects at work within them are all the law of Renge, the lotus. Here, living beings and their environments means the phenomena of life and death. Thus it is clear that where life and death exist, cause and effect of the law of the lotus is at work. The great teacher Dengyo states the two phases of life and death are the wonderful workings of one mind. The two ways of existence and non-existence are the true functions of an inherently enlightened mind. No phenomena, either heaven or earth, yin or yang, or the sun or the moon, the 5 planets, or any of the worlds from hell to Buddhahood are free from the 2 phases of life and death. Life and death are simply the 2 functions of Myoho Renge-kyo. In his great concentration and insight, Tentai says, arising is the arising of the essential nature of the law, and extinction is the extinction of that nature. Shakyamuni and many treasures, the 2 Buddhas are also the 2 phases of life and death. Okay, so President Ikeda's lecture really starts here. First, Nichiren Daishonin explains that Myo, mystic, represents death, and Ho, law, life. This means that the mystic law itself embodies the 2 phases of life and death, or life in its totality. Right? Put another way, life and death are inherent and integral parts of the mystic law, the fundamental law of the universe. Indeed, they constitute its innate rhythm. Now, what's it talking about when he's talking about how does life and death constitute its innate rhythm? Because the life and death that we're talking about is not real beginning of life, and it's not real extinction of life. Do you understand? Because everything's always existed and always will continue to exist. That's the whole point. So life and death aren't really life as in giving rise, and death as in extinction. That's what we've already discussed, right? There is no ebb and flow in reality. What seems like ebb and flow isn't really ebb and flow. That's what we discussed, right? So he's saying, let me put another, okay, let me read it again. First, Nichiren Daishonin explains that Myo, mystic, represents death, and Ho, law, life. Both the 2 phases of reality that we just discussed in the previous paragraph, right? This means that the mystic law itself, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, embodies life and death. Right. That death is just as much Nam-myoho Renge-kyo as life is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, right? Okay? Or life in its totality, because again, this state of existence, and then non-existence, and then existence, and then non-existence. This is life in its totality, right? In your non-substantial state or your manifest state, it doesn't matter. That's what we're talking about. Totality. That's the totality they're speaking of. Are you with me? Okay. Put another way, life and death are inherent and integral parts of the mystic law, the fundamental law of the universe. Indeed, they constitute its innate rhythm. So what is he saying there? Indeed, they constitute its innate rhythm. How do they constitute its innate rhythm? Are they just happy words? What does that mean? Indeed, they constitute its innate rhythm. What's he saying then about the universe and life and death? That moment by moment, second by second, things are going into the non-substantial state from the substantial state, okay, which is being viewed as death. Death of a star, death of a solar system, death of a person, death of anything, all right? And things are coming out of the non-substantial state into existing in this world, into the manifest state, and seeming to be given rise to. But in reality, they're not either. He says, the rhythm, the innate rhythm of the universe is that everything is constantly changing. Everything that is manifest is slowly going towards what seems to be extinction. Everything that's in a non-substantial state is getting closer to coming out. Does everybody understand what I'm saying then? Okay, that's the innate rhythm he's discussing. Based on the concept of dependent origination, Buddhism holds that all things exist together in mutual interdependence, and that's all things, not just the things around you. All things, okay? So that means you're tied to the sun. You're tied to this solar system, okay? It's much deeper than you think about, I live in this country, this city, this whatever. Earth is just another place in reference to what we're talking about here, right? It's not the center of everything, okay? So based on the concept of dependent origination, Buddhism holds that all things exist together in mutual interdependence and that nothing exists in isolation. living beings, phenomena, and their various causes and conditions arise, change, and disappear amid an infinite web of interconnectedness. When we think about it, the fact that the universe is boundlessly, what's boundlessly mean? With no limitation, no restraint, no end, okay, is boundlessly interconnected, and that the life and death of all individual beings are part of that is something truly wondrous and unfathomable. When we think about it, and please think about it now, the fact that the universe is boundlessly interconnected and that the life and death of all individual beings are part of that is something truly wondrous and unfathomable. It's truly wondrous, and I can't figure out exactly what that means. Do you? So again, it's unfathomable. When we talk about infinity, anybody that says, I understand infinity, yeah, right. Foolish. Okay. This is why the law of the universe is called the mystic law. Why is it called the mystic law? Because it's mysterious. It's beyond your capacity to comprehend exactly as it truly exists. Okay? The only time that occurs finally is Buddhahood, when all the lights go on. Yes. All right? Then you have a concept that absolutely coincides with what that just discussed. Okay? In fact, that's how you view everything. Right. All right? So, in the heritage of the ultimate law of life, Nichiren draws the distinction that Myo, mystic, represents death, and Ho, law, life. Because Ho indicates manifest phenomena, it corresponds to life that is manifested as individual living beings. Myo, on the other hand, indicating that which is mysterious or inscrutable. What's inscrutable mean? Too difficult to discern, to be able to perceive absolutely correctly. It's inscrutable. You can't just figure it out by looking at it. Corresponds to death, reflecting the fact that the vast universe into which all life fuses at death is difficult to fathom. Right? Yeah. I mean, isn't that kind of difficult? What's going to happen to me when I die? To know for sure? That's kind of an unfathomable thing. That's what he's talking about. Reflecting the fact that the vast universe into which all life fuses at death is difficult to fathom. How could your life fuse with the universe? That's the teaching, though, right? You go into Ku, right? All right, so, but the main point of this statement, and here we go with the beginning of this, comma, I believe, comma, is to show that life and death of all living beings in the infinite tapestry of the universe are functions of the mystic law. So what did he just say there? In the heritage of the ultimate law of life, Nichiren draws the distinction that Myo, mystic, represents death, and Ho, law, life, and Ho, law, life. Because Ho indicates manifest phenomena, it corresponds to life that is manifested as individual living beings. Myo, on the other hand, indicating that which is mysterious or inscrutable, corresponds to death, reflecting the fact that the vast universe into which all life fuses at death is difficult to fathom. Okay? But the main point of this statement, I believe, is to show that life and death, that the life and death of all living beings in the infinite tapestry of the universe are functions of the mystic law. So what did he just qualify there? When he says, I believe, he's talking about something that he's extrapolated from his own experience and the teaching of Buddhism. This is where we now start to enter what we now refer to as the Soka philosophy. This is an extension of an understanding of Nichiren's teaching that originated with the founding three presidents. It's all because it's all contained within the practice of the Soka Gakkai for Kosen Rufu. Do understand that that's the difference between all other practices of Nichiren Buddhism of any sort and what we're doing. Okay, because we do Jigyo Keita. We don't wait for somebody. We're not like going to Sunday school. We're not trying to be saved. Okay? No. We're not trying to be saved. We're trying to learn how to save others. Okay? It's only through that process that we are saved. We can't save ourselves. We can only save ourselves in the process of being bodhisattvas of the earth. The only way that occurs is if we're devoted to helping others. All right? So that, again, when he says, but the main point of this statement, I believe, is to show that life and death of all living beings in the infinite tapestry of the universe are functions of the mystic law, is Daisaku Ikeda's take on things. Do you understand? That's what I'm trying to qualify. And mine. I totally agree with him. Okay? But he's had the balls to put it out there. All right? This, you won't find a quote from Toda saying exactly that way. Okay? This is a clarification of what Toda was saying. In fact, you won't find much of Toda saying anything outside of Japanese.
Right.
All right? And the reason is because it's difficult to understand what he was saying in the context of 50s Japanese, doctrine and the manner in which this was being conveyed and how it's actually shaken out over the course of that 50 years, how it's validated itself. All right? At that time, it hadn't validated. We thought someday somebody will be, that kind of fine people will actually start practicing, remember? Then they all grew into those kinds of people. All right? That's what he's talking about. That's the maturation that's actually occurred since the 50s when this all started, is the reality of life. Okay? Like, for instance, the priesthood didn't control everything. Back then, they still believed that they did to some degree. Do you follow?
Yeah.
Okay. Metaphor of the ocean and the waves. The relationship between the mystic law and life and death could be described as being similar to a wave appearing on the surface of the ocean and then submerging back into the ocean again. When the ocean represents the mystic law and the wave an individual life or phenomena, the pattern of waves arising from the ocean and then returning to it corresponds to the cycle of birth and death. It must be noted, however, that individual lives do not get swallowed up upon death in the ocean of the mystic law and disappear in the same way that a casual observer may see ordinary waves disappearing into the ocean. Do you understand what he's saying there? Huh? Everybody's with me? Okay. In other words, again, it's not the great mystic law and you're merging back into God. That is not what we're talking about. It's not a parallel concept to that. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's upgrading, or we call that upgrade.
Well, again,
he's talking to people of his time.
Actually, the upgrading is really not really an upgrading. It's a return to.
But but with a way of talking nowadays. He wants to have he wants his message to pass to next generation.
Well, what he really wants his message to do is to do it without the mystification of the hierarchical aspect of the church.
We are in
Okay,
in
right.
This
is time for people's actual wisdom to emerge from their life, so that they see what's governing their life, so that they are empowered to change their life. All right. So the relationship between the mystic law and life and death could be described as being similar to a wave appearing on the surface of the ocean and submerging back into the ocean again, wherein the ocean represents the mystic law and the wave an individual life or phenomena. The pattern of waves arising from the ocean and then returning to it corresponds to the cycle of birth and death. It must be noted, however, that individual lives do not get swallowed up upon death in the ocean of the mystic law and disappear in the same way that a casual observer may see ordinary waves disappearing into the ocean. If we consider that there are various currents flowing through the ocean not visible from the surface, the difference between life and death could be likened to that between surface waves and the undulating currents within the ocean's depths. The life essence of an individual is certainly not extinguished at death. Life and death are simply the undulations of the mystic law itself. Undulations within the ocean's depths appear on the surface as waves and then submerge again into the ocean, once more becoming invisible undulations. In the same way, a wave of life that manifests on the surface of the ocean of the mystic law will, at death, merge once more with that ocean and continue its unseen undulations, or it's continuing to exist in the state of non-existence. All right? When conditions are right, that life essence will appear again as a new wave. All right? Continuing on page 24, an existence originally joyful, pure, and bright. Next, Nichiren Daishonin says, living beings that pass through the two phases of life and death are the entities of the 10 worlds. This contains a very important point. The two aspects of life and death, which make up life in its totality, because that's all there is to life, right? You're either manifest or you're not, right? To the reality of a karmic influence. The two aspects of life and death, which make up life in its totality, encompass the 10 worlds, or 10 potential states of life inherent in each individual being. This means that all living beings of the 10 worlds are entities of the mystic law that embodies these two phenomena. Or put another way, the phenomena of life and death inherent in the mystic law are the true substance of the lives of all beings of the 10 worlds. Ooh, did you catch that? This means that all living beings of the 10 worlds are entities of the mystic law that embodies these two phenomena of life and death. Or put another way, the phenomena of life and death inherent in the mystic law are the true substance of the lives of all beings of the 10 worlds. Okay? The non-theoretical, the reality of that Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the things that are all Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Yeah. When we talk about it like words or a phrase or a law. But in reality, it's the entire phenomenal realm. Right. Okay? For example, let us look at people born into the lowest of the 10 worlds, born into shitty karma, the world of hell. While physically experiencing the world of hell, physical manifestation corresponding to the aspect of life, they also possess within the capacity to experience the other 9 worlds. The phenomena of life and death, representing life in its entirety, which is the mystic law, are the true substance of their beings. Everybody's with me? So hell isn't the true substance of their beings. The mystic law is the truth, which contains all other 9, as well as hell, right? Okay, so this is the original and inherent nature of life and death. While filled with anxiety and confusion about the important questions of life and existence, human beings are racked by the sufferings of aging and death. This is because they failed to realize that their own existence is part of the cycle of life and death that have always been an innate part of life. That's from the record of the orally transmitted teachings, okay? But when we deeply realize this truth, we are liberated from the illusions and sufferings of birth and death. Because we have nothing to fear about death being some uncertain place. We can have great conviction about what's going to happen after we die based on what happens while we're alive. That's the beautiful thing about this Buddhism. You can see the power of the truth of the teaching while you're still alive, so that you can have faith in the teaching that is about the part that exists while you're dead. Do you understand? Because it continues to exist while you're dead, because you're not really dead. Do you understand? Okay, so I got this asterisk like an underline. Let me go back over the asterisks and underlines. Okay, one more time. The phenomena of life and death, representing life in its entirety, because the two aspects of life and death that make up life in its totality, life and death, right? Which is the mystic law, because that's what Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is that aspect of life and death that exists in all things that go into life and death. Everything goes into life and death, right? In fact, the life and death aspect is the true substance of all things. That's what that says, right? Right? Because that's what everything shares. Everything has that in common. Okay? This is the original and inherent nature of life and death. While filled with anxiety and confusion about the important questions of life and existence, human beings are racked by the sufferings of aging and death. This is because they fail to realize that their own existence is part of the cycle of birth and death that have always been an innate part of life. When we deeply realize this truth, we are liberated from the illusions and sufferings of birth and death. Based on this profound awakening in prison, Josei Toda, the second Soka Gakkai president, discussed the inherent nature of our lives from time without beginning and described it as the state of life totally free of the illusions of birth and death. Now, do you notice what's happening here?
When he was in jail.
Yeah, but also he's shifting away from Nichiren Shoshu, isn't he? He's talking now about Soka Gakkai. He's talking about three founding. He's talking about Josei Toda realized that's what taught me this. Mm-hmm. Okay? Based on his profound awakening in prison, Josei Toda II, Soka Gakkai president, discussed the inherent nature of our lives from time without beginning. So he's talking about when is President Toda starting to talk about this now? Because this is another concept that he's kind of like, it's been there all along, but nobody's really talked about it before. Kuan Ganjo, Kuan. Okay? The time before numberless major world system dust particle kalpas ago. Okay? That's really what the significance of Kuan is. All right? The second Soka Gakkai president discussed the inherent nature of our lives from time without beginning, Kuan, and described it as a state of life totally free of illusions of birth and death. Okay, Toda qualified it as such. He continues. Now from here, where you see that quotation mark, all the way down to here, this is all going to be Josei Toda talking. When we observe our existence, this is Toda talking, when we observe our existence, we find that in the remote past of time without beginning, in Kuan, we lived with total freedom in a brilliant realm of purity and joy. We were all beautiful in spirit and of like mind. We who once dwelled in such a sparkling sphere have now all emerged together in this strife-filled Sahe world. Looking back, I feel as though it was only yesterday that we lived in that pure, pleasant realm. How could we possibly forget that brilliant place? How could we forget the friends with whom we joyously passed our lives in absolute freedom? And how could we forget the vows we made together at the assembly where the Lotus Sutra was expounded? This Sahe world was also originally inhabited by friends who are all joyful and pure and bright and on good terms with one another. Isn't it therefore most pitiful and sad that, having been forced to drink the poisons of greed, anger, and jealousy by proponents of the provisional Mahayana, Hinayana, and non-Buddhist teachings, we have become like deranged children and have all forgotten the remote past? Now that's how he encouraged everybody in the 50s, right? Which is really reaching for them to have faith in what he's saying, okay? President Ikeda goes on. Good friends, joyful, pure, and bright, dwelling together harmoniously in freedom, who pledged to strive for the happiness of both themselves and others. This describes our original selves of time without beginning, free of all illusion. This describes the realm of time without beginning. Now, what is that describing then, though? The original state, the original disciples, the original teacher. This describes ourselves of time without beginning. That could only be Kuan. Okay? And free and who exists in Kuan? The bodhisattvas of the earth, the original disciples of the original teacher. Mm-hmm. You go in, you read it as the sage that, okay? This describes the realm of time without beginning. Qualify this. To recover this original self, this realm of time without beginning, we each need to be aware that our own life is an entity of the mystic law. And we have to realize that we ourselves possess the power to break free of the chain of causality that gives rise to illusion and leads to suffering. Okay, so did you follow what he was saying there?
It looks like Eden.
Pardon?
It looks like the Garden of Eden.
It sounds like the Garden of Eden. It sounds like what anybody that would be trying to describe something pure and magnificent would probably describe it as. Okay? So, but what is this original self, though, in reality, as we know it today, based on another 40 years having happened since President Toda might have been saying all of this? Again, had the Soko Gakkai become some big ass power? Was there any kind of political power to it before he died? When Josei Toda would have been saying all this stuff, he died in 1957, I believe. Was the Soko Gakkai? Was the Komeito Party? All that, was there a Shohondo? Was there any kind of real big conflict? Was there a reason for any kind of a big conflict? Were there community centers all over the world? Was the Soko Gakkai involved in this and that? Was Josei Toda ever meeting famous philosophers from other thoughts and thought processes throughout the world? Was he getting honor? Was Josei Toda getting honorary awards? Was he? The United Nations didn't even exist yet. Okay, so it can't be a part of the UN and peace and all that stuff. So when Josei Toda is talking about all this bright light and all this stuff, don't forget that pretty much does describe Kosen Rufu. In reality, that is the reality that we're advancing toward, right? He sees it from the past because he says, okay, based on, so I hoped you caught this. What I just read you is based on his profound awakening in prison. Now, does that mean that he saw like some sort of a Technicolor movie and he says, oh, that's the way it was? Or did he get a sense of life that he carried forward that was not capable of being expressed in words that would correlate in a way that other people could receive and understand it? Because you didn't have that profound awakening. Frankly, no one at this table has had his profound awakening. Okay? So for any of this to be something that you could take issue with the description on is your own limitation. That's what I want to qualify. Okay? Yeah. All right, so the law of the lotus, because this is going from theoretical to the actual. This is actual Ichinen Sanzen being expressed here. Not theoretical Ichinen Sanzen, not a theoretical understanding of the teaching. Somebody that has experienced and actualized the teaching is expressing it that way. Why does Daisaku Ikeda talk the way he does? You talk to anybody that's been practicing correctly for a long, long, long time. I got many mentors I could talk about right now that speak exactly like this. They talked, there was no separation between the way they talked and the way Daisaku Ikeda is teaching this right now. The law of the lotus, the law of the simultaneity of cause and effect. On page 25. Nichiren Daishonin says, living beings that pass through the two phases of life and death are the entities of the 10 worlds, or the entities of Myoho Rengekyo. In this passage, entity of Myoho Rengekyo literally translates as the lotus of the entity, or the embodied lotus. Now, I'm going to go back and read you that because it's real important for everybody to know about this lotus that is the entity. Point 11. Lotus of the entity, because remember, this is the opposite of the figurative lotus. One is an example to help you wrap your head around it, and this is the actualization of the theoretical. Okay, the lotus of the entity is the actual. The lotus, figurative lotus, is theoretical. It's to allow you to begin to understand the concept. So, lotus of the entity. Who is the lotus of the entity, George?
We are.
We are. We are. I know you know that. That's why I was asking. A reference, lotus of the entity, also embodied lotus, true lotus, lotus of your life. A reference in the Tentai doctrine to the lotus that is the essence of the Lotus Sutra, the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo aspect of you. And also the people who are entities of or who embody this essence, bodhisattvas of the earth. Nichiren Daishonin described this essence as Myoho Renge-kyo or Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. In The Entity of the Mystic Law, he writes, the supreme principle that is the mystic law was originally without a name. Oh, this will give you a little story. When the sage was observing the principle and assigning names to all things, he perceived that there is this wonderful single law, myoho, that simultaneously possesses both cause and effect. And he named it myoho renge. The term lotus of the entity or embodied lotus is contrasted with the figurative lotus or the lotus as a metaphor for the law. Since the lotus of the entity or lotus of the law that simultaneously possesses both cause and effect is difficult to understand, the lotus plant, which blooms and produces fruit at the same time, is employed as a metaphor. Okay? So everybody understands that totai ringe? Okay, that's you. Okay, so starting again. Living beings that pass through the two phases of life and death are the entities of the 10 worlds, or the entities of Myoho Rengekyo. In this passage, entity of Myoho Rengekyo literally translates to the lotus of the entity or the embodied lotus, and as such expresses the potential for each of us to regain the infinite power of the mystic law and restore our original self. Okay, what's your original self? Buddhahood. Buddhahood. Lotus or renge is a metaphor for the simultaneity of cause and effect. With most plants, the flowers bloom first and then the seeds are formed. But with the lotus, the fruit and flowers appear together. If the flowers are likened to the cause and effect and the fruit to the effect, then the lotus, which flowers and seeds at the same time, symbolizes how cause and effect are simultaneous in the mystic law. All living beings have the potential to experience any of the 10 worlds. But though it may be relatively easy to find ourselves in any of the other 9 worlds, bringing forth and experiencing the highest world of Buddhahood is extremely difficult. Why is this? On deeply pondering and pursuing this question, Shakyamuni Buddha elucidated the causality for revealing the world of Buddhahood. In other words, he clarified the strict law of cause and effect, or principle of causality, that influences and determines a person's state of life in the here and now. So what's that talking about then? On deeply pondering and pursuing this question, which is, why is it so difficult to bring out the world of Buddhahood? Shakyamuni Buddha elucidated the causality for revealing the world of Buddhahood. He elucidated the causality for revealing the world of Buddhahood. In other words, he clarified the strict law of cause and effect, or principle of causality, that influences and determines a person's state of life in the here and now. But when he elucidated the causality for revealing the world of Buddhahood, what was that? It was faith, basically. Faith. Okay? And it was all predicated on you doing that faith as a cause that you would get this effect, right? Okay, so there are 2 levels to the principle of causality. Everybody's with me right now, right? Okay. The first is that of simple karmic retribution, receiving reward or punishment in accord with one's actions. That's the way most people view it. This way of thinking teaches that making good causes leads to happiness, joy, and ease, while making bad causes leads to suffering, pains, and misery. So does Christianity, so does Islam, so does everything else. It all teaches that kind of karma, right? Okay. This way of thinking teaches that making good causes leads to happiness, joy, and ease, while making bad causes leads to suffering, pain, and misfortune. The second level goes beyond this former idea to reveal a still more fundamental principle of causality governing all life. Buddhism teaches that when we reveal the supreme world of Buddhahood inherent in our lives, we actualize the highest good and thereby instantly establish a state of unshakable happiness. In other words, it is possible for us as living beings of the 9 worlds, bound by the causality of the 3 paths, earthly desires, karma, and suffering, being normal human beings, to bring forth the effect or fruit of enlightenment by revealing our innate Buddhahood or Buddha nature. But what does this second level talk about then? The second level goes beyond this former idea to reveal a still more fundamental principle of causality governing all life. What's that? What's the difference between that and what he says? There are 2 levels. He says the first is that of simple karmic retribution.
So the normal
What's the first one pertain to? Primarily, almost.
Normal human being and awakened one.
Yeah. But the first one has to do with a view of life centered on you. Okay. The second one is a view of life
No separation.
with no separation, viewed
Right.
on a basis of everything.
Right.
Instead of just, am I okay? Okay, understanding.
We are all okay.
We're all okay.
We are all okay.
Okay?
Yes.
That's what it's talking about.
Much
All right?
more.
This is a much more shallow, this is a much more shallow perspective of reality than one that's, okay, son's going to die too, goddammit. Okay? I don't have to be worried about that. All right? So, this deeper level of causality, everybody's with me, right?
Yes.
Okay. This deeper this deeper level of causality taught in Buddhism differs from ordinary temporal cause and effect or general causality. At work here is the principle of the simultaneity of cause and effect, which teaches that through a change in the depths of our own hearts or minds, we can bring forth our inherent Buddhahood right here and now, because we're part of a cycle that is Buddhahood, okay? And it includes more than just us.
Right.
Tapping the great life force of the universe in our lives. The cycle of birth and death, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, the cycle of transmigration, is a strict causal law that no one can escape. This causality highlights how each individual is responsible for his or her life, thereby offering a much greater sense of independence and freedom than the idea that the individual is helplessly at the mercy of an arbitrary destiny or fate bestowed by some transcendent absolute being. But it ultimately leaves people feeling overwhelmed and oppressed by the massive weight of karma they have accumulated over countless existences. Okay, when you realize there's nothing that's going to save you and that you've got to change all of this through your own effort, it can seem to be like completely too much. Okay? This is where the causality of the mystic law comes in. Okay? Because really, what gives you the strength and courage to be able to start that conquest? Life condition. And that's what comes from facing the Gohonsa, no matter what the situation is right now. That will begin to generate that courage, and that hope will begin to come forward, because the wisdom will be there that allows you to see why this is not defeat. This is where the causality of the mystic law comes in. Based on the principle that living beings possess all the 10 worlds, it clarifies how we can break free of the heavy weight of accumulated karma by transforming it at the most fundamental level of life itself. Each of us, now listen to this, this is really important, because this means that this is a flip. This is talking about how you can flip things. You don't have to go through the unwinding of all that bad karma. That's what he's qualifying here. All right? Each of us, regardless of what spiritual state we may presently be in, we can talk about the example he picked out a minute ago of hell, absolutely possess in the depths of our lives the powerful state of Buddhahood, overflowing with supreme wisdom. When we reveal this inner Buddhahood, we can surmount all obstacles, because we gain tremendous fortune in revealing this inner Buddhahood. Do we not? It doesn't just reveal itself on its own. We have to start doing the things that make it revealed, right? Those are causes that obliterate that karma. Okay, so we change that karma from poison into medicine. And it's actually the firewood that propels us to turn that from poison into medicine. When we reveal this inner Buddhahood, we can surmount all obstacles. This is the working of the law of the lotus, the law of the simultaneity of cause and effect. Right? When we awaken to this reality, so now he's prefacing what he's about to say here, to say, when we awaken, what I'm about to say is true. Okay?
Right.
So qualify that. When we awaken to this reality that we just discussed, we can break through any hardship or adversity and positively open up and transform our destiny. Why? Because if you are in this reality, you will constantly be doing the things that allow you to accomplish that. You're chanting Daimoku with faith to the object of devotion. You're challenging your obstacle for the sake of not just yourself to overcome it, to be actual proof of the power of the law. You're actually also experiencing life experience that's going to give you wisdom, that's going to allow you to encourage other people as the Buddha in your present form. You can't know shit if you haven't done shit or been through it.
Right.
Really. When we awaken to this reality, so it's not going to happen in the first week or 2 or 3 years, maybe even. You might have to go a little longer than that.
Right.
Okay? We can break through any hardship or adversity and positively open up and transform our destiny. This is how we can attain ultimate indestructible freedom, abounding with supreme autonomy. What's autonomy mean? Huh? No influence from anything else. Complete freedom. Right? Also, when we are confident of the infinite power within us, not when we're wondering if it's there. When we're wondering if it's there, we haven't chanted enough Daimoku.
Right.
When we've chanted enough Daimoku, there is no doubt about how powerful we are.
Right.
Right? This is how, okay. Also, when we are confident of the infinite power within us, an imperturbable hope is born in our hearts. The hope of faith, the hope of destiny, of mission. All right? Thus, when difficulties assail us, no matter how serious, we can see them as challenges through which we can demonstrate the power of the mystic law within us, and also as wonderful sought-for opportunities, that we should tackle head on. When we approach things with this positive attitude and tenaciously triumph over each obstacle, we can develop and elevate our own state of life enormously and construct a truly invincible state of freedom. All right? Myoho Geikyo is indeed the supreme teaching, bringing people true hope and inner freedom. And once again, how could you know, if you're a Nichiren Shoshu priest, how could you say that with any certainty other than that's what the teaching says? Because you wouldn't have lived a life like this. Okay? This is the truth of the Soka Gakkai, the truth of the Soka philosophy. That's why we teach each other now. We don't have a top-down process. Okay? Our first Soka Gakkai president, Tanesaburo Makaguchi, remarked, "The life force of every one of us without exception is a manifestation of the great life force of the universe. Accordingly, the great law that is the fountainhead of the life force of all universal phenomena, which manifests as agents of that life force, including human beings, which do the same, is the mystic law, and as such is the essence and substance encompassing all principles governing life." Let me read that again. Our first Soka Gakkai president, Tanesaburo Makaguchi, remarked, "The life force of every one of us without exception is a manifestation of the great life force of the universe. Accordingly, the great law that is the fountainhead of the life force of all universal phenomena, which manifests as agents of that life force, including human beings, which do the same, is the mystic law, and as such is the essence and substance encompassing all principles governing life. When we tap the great fundamental life," end of quotes, continuing President Keita, "when we tap the great fundamental life force of the universe inherent in our lives, we achieve a towering state of being in which we can summon up power as immense as the universe itself." Almost done. This towering state of life, all universal phenomena are the workings of compassion. This towering state of life is certainly not governed by a selfish impulse that seeks only personal happiness. Ooh. This towering state of life is certainly not governed by a selfish impulse that seeks only personal happiness. It's Jigyo Keita, Jigyo Keita, Jigyo Keita. Practice for yourself and others, right? Rather, it gives rise to a spirit of mutual support and encouragement directed toward everyone realizing their full potential and toward drawing forth and harmonizing each person's individuality. To care for and encourage others is compassion, and compassion is a function that pervades the entire universe. And what also is compassion? What is compassion the actual source of? Which is what we're trying to gain here. We're going through this whole exercise to do what?
Human
Gain Buddha wisdom. Gain Buddha wisdom, to become Buddhas in our present form. That's the whole point, right? Okay, and so do we have the wisdom to be considered Buddhas when we start out on that process? No. Okay, and how are we encouraged to practice this? So substituting faith for wisdom, right? So, but where does the wisdom then actually come from that manifests in our lives over the course of that point and attaining Buddhahood?
Through your own practice.
Through your practice.
Yes.
Through your practice, through the jigyokeda of your practice, where you're practicing for yourself and you're teaching others and you're learning in your own life and you're expressing that to others. You're not holding back. You're constantly trying to bring people along with you.
Right.
You're not doing it to be the leader. Okay?
Right.
You're doing it because you find yourself in the lead, and that's what you're supposed to do if you find yourself in the lead. Okay? But again, wisdom comes from compassion. You don't gain compassion from being wise. President Toda used to describe the universe. Okay, so once again, he's going, President Toda said this. Wait until we get in the next chapter. It's all President Toda said. Okay? So what he's laying out the Soka philosophy. All right? Why doesn't he quote anybody else? Because Toda's the only one that said this the way he's saying it right now. President Toda used to describe the universe as inherently expressing the workings of compassion. Inherently expressing the workings of compassion. Wisdom, Buddha wisdom. He wrote, in the first place, the universe in its entirety is the substance of the Buddha. Right? Because everything's Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Right? You get it? And all phenomena in the universe are the workings of compassion. Do you understand then? They have to be, right? Because they're sustaining life everywhere. Right? Even the non-existent planets are still sustaining something because they're a part of they're interdependent with other things. Therefore, compassion is the inherent nature of the universe. Since the universe is still in quotations. Since the universe itself is compassion, that of course means that our daily activities naturally constitute the workings of compassion themselves. Because we lead privileged lives as human beings, we must not descend to the same level as animals or plants. Carrying out more exalted activities is the attitude of those truly dedicated to serving the Buddha. Continuing the quotations, President Toda says, as Nichiren Daishonin taught, we must chant Daimoku with correct faith, encourage others to do the same, and foster still more people whose activities naturally abound with compassion. When we chant, and this is President Keda continuing, when we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo with the deep conviction that we are entities of the mystic law, the fundamental law of the universe, we can bring forth the great life force of the mystic law, which is infused with wisdom and compassion. And we can use it to break through any painful difficulty or obstacle and establish a state of absolute happiness that nothing can destroy. If we continue on this path, then, when the moment of death finally comes, we will savor a state of tremendous inner peace and contentment that derives from maintaining a correct and steadfast attitude in faith. What this means is cherishing the firm conviction that my life itself is the mystic law and upholding a correct view of life and death. And so what did this just talk about? When we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo with the deep conviction that we are entities of the mystic law, the fundamental law of the universe, we can bring forth the great life force of the mystic law, which is infused with wisdom and compassion. What's that?
We have to activate this.
We are being the Buddha. And we can use it to break through any painful difficulty or obstacle and establish a state of absolute happiness that nothing can destroy, being the Buddha. If we continue on this path, then, when the moment of death finally comes, we will savor a state of tremendous inner peace and contentment that derives from maintaining a correct and steadfast attitude in faith, Buddhahood in our present form. What this means is cherishing a firm conviction that my life itself is the mystic law and upholding the correct view of life and death based on the middle way. That's again being the Buddha. while rejecting the views of annihilation or permanence, being the Buddha. Achieving a death that is of that sort is the supreme and ultimate goal of life, being the Buddha. Here, both life and death are filled with joy, being the Buddha. At the moment of death, those who complete their present existence with correct and steadfast faith will embody in the very depths of their being the compassionate workings of the universe, which will undoubtedly lead them once again stand up and make a great vow and embark on a noble struggle for Kosen Rufu. For we who practice Nichiren Buddhism, death signals the start of a hope-filled journey to our next existence. End, page 28. Let me go ahead and get into key points so we start on a clean spot next time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Key points on page 29. Was everybody with me, what he was just saying there? At the moment of death, those who complete their present existence with correct and steadfast faith will embody in the very depths of their being the compassionate workings of the universe. Okay, so what does that really say then, going back to the examples that we had discussed earlier? When we talk about the importance of the final moment of death, do you think it really just boils down to the final moment of death? No, I think that, again,
It's a
at the
new
moment
beginning.
of death, those who complete their present existence, okay, with correct and steadfast faith. So that's taking it to the end of your consciousness, okay? That's not if you were on pain meds or you were on hospice or something. I don't think that you lose all of that just because you use modern science. Do you understand? Okay, it says, at the moment of death, those who complete their existence with correct and steadfast faith. If you complete it, it means you took it as far as you could take it, okay, in the realm of conscious ability to control what you're doing, all right? In the very depths of their being, the compassionate workings of the universe. So, in the very depths of their being, the compassionate workings of the universe. Would that sound like that's some strict thing that's going to have a lot of sharp edges? No, I don't think so. That's not how I receive it at all either. Which will undoubtedly lead them to once again stand up and make a great vow and embark on a noble struggle for Kosen Rufu, what President Toda was suggesting everybody would be doing. For we who practice Nichiren Buddhism, death signals the start of a hope-filled journey to our next existence. To go do it all over again. And then to do it all over again. And then to do it all over again. And then to do it all over again. Like we will next week. Okay, recap. Life and death are a part of the inherent rhythm of the mystic law. Based on the concept of dependent origination, Buddhism holds that all things exist together in mutual interdependence and that nothing exists in isolation. This is on page 29. Living beings, phenomena, and their various causes and conditions arise, change, and disappear amid an infinite web of interconnectedness. When we think about it, the fact that the universe is boundlessly interconnected and that the life and death of all individual beings are part of that is something truly wondrous and unfathomable. This is why the law of the universe is called the mystic law. An existence originally joyful, pure, and bright, Nichiren Daishonin says living beings that pass through the two phases of life and death are the entities of the 10 worlds. This contains a very important point. The two aspects of life and death, which make up life in its totality, encompass the 10 worlds or the 10 potential states of life inherent in each individual being. This means that all living beings of the 10 worlds are entities of the mystic law that embodies these two phenomena. Or put another way, the phenomena of life and death inherent in the mystic law are the true substance of the lives of all beings of the 10 worlds. All universal phenomena are the workings of compassion. When we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo with the deep conviction that we are entities of the mystic law, the fundamental law of the universe, we can bring forth the great life force of the mystic law, which is infused with wisdom and compassion, and we can use it to break through any painful difficulty or obstacle and establish a state of absolute happiness that nothing can destroy. Pardon me. If we continue on this path, then when the moment of death finally comes, we will savor a state of tremendous inner peace and contentment that derives from maintaining a correct and steadfast attitude and faith. What this means is cherishing the firm conviction that my life itself is the mystic law and upholding a correct view of life and death based on the middle way while rejecting the views of annihilation and permanence. Achieving a death of that sort is the supreme and ultimate goal of life. Here both life and death are filled with joy. Dialogue and reflection, 2 questions. SGI President Ikeda states, the fact that the universe is boundlessly interconnected and that life and death of all individuals are part, all individual beings are part of that is something truly wondrous and unfathomable. What impact does this Buddhist view of life and death have upon your own fear and anxiety regarding death? Think about that. And then when we tap the great fundamental life force of the universe inherent in our lives, we achieve a towering state of being in which we can summon up power as immense as the universe itself. This towering state of life is certainly not governed by a selfish impulse that seeks only personal happiness. The question is, how does this resonate with your efforts for the sake of others through participating in SGI USA activities? Okay, and with that, we'll take a 1 week break. See you week after next, and thank you so much when we start with chapter 4 on page 31. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.